The first one is from Chris Bradley. Is it true that a degree in criminal justice or experience as a cop helps to attract clients? Well, the answer, Chris, is kind of complicated because the simple answer to a lot of questions that I get asked is, well, it all depends. If you have experience, former experience in law enforcement, or if you have a criminal justice degree, it can help in certain situations. It can definitely give credibility if you're having to take the stand in court. It can definitely add credibility to that as a private investigator. Some of your clients may want that. Some of your clients may not want that. I will say this, for former law enforcement experience people getting into the PI business, I have seen many a cop come into the PI business and many a cop not succeed in the business. But I've seen some that are really, really good, and they are still in business. They've been in business for years. So it all really kind of depends. It's going to depend on what kind of experience you have, what kind of investigations you have, things like that. So we're going to go on to the next question here. This one is from Tanya T. Do you advise investigators that have a lot of tattoos to try to hide them? And again, it's going to kind of depend on the types of investigations you're doing and what kind of tattoos you have too. Again, if you're taking the stand as a witness or as an investigator in court, the attorneys may ask you to cover those up depending on what they are. But if they help you kind of associate with the jury, they may want them to be exposed. If you're doing a lot of surveillance and you have a lot of tattoos, very colorful tattoos that might help people identify you, you may want to have those covered up as well, especially if you're doing a lot of foot surveillance, following them into the shopping mall or into a grocery store, something like that. This video is sponsored by OREP Insurance and Working PI Magazine. OREP is a leading provider of private investigator liability insurance. Visit orep.org for a quote today. So again, it's kind of really going to depend on the different situations. Just use your common sense and see what's going to work there. Our next question, where can I learn shadowing tailing techniques? I'm building up my equipment and practicing some background checks, but I'm not confident in my tailing abilities. Well, iTrap 45X, the easiest answer is right here on the channel here. And let me show you here my channel. Hopefully this all works really well for me. This is my surveillance training videos for private investigators playlist. And you can go through this playlist right here, and I have years, literally years, dozens, if not hundreds of surveillance training videos that you can go through, and you can just click over here on the play all and you can just binge watch them. You can check them all out. That's going to be the best place probably to be able to go and find a lot of that information. I am working on a full-length advanced training on surveillance that I hope to get released this summer, and I've been working on it for quite a while, but I've just gotten so busy I haven't been able to do it. But I'm hoping to have that released, and you can check out my website, freeprivateinvestigator.com, and in there there's other advanced training in there as well. So let's go to the next question, and I've got a little bit of a technical glitch here. There, that should fix it. So this is two questions from Pillars Investigations. Were you alone back in 2008, and did you start with an office, or were you stationed? So when I started as a private investigator way back in 2008, I was alone, as I still am in my business. It's just me. I'm a one-man shop. Now, I do have a lot of PIs that I subcontract with, and I take subcontract work from other investigation firms too, but it's just me right here in this office. What you see back behind, well, that is a photo of my office. It's not my actual office, but it is where I am right now. I can't put a live photo of it up. I have too much sensitive data on there, but it kind of gives you an idea of what my office looks like, all the different screens and all my notes and everything like that are on there. So I did start alone. I did start right here in this office. I have tried to have some other offices in the past. I had an office downtown one time that I used for a while, just so I had a place to meet with people, but I never used it a whole lot. So I ended up not using it. So it just ended up being, more of cost that I didn't really want. James asks, I'm sure you have a video on this already, but I haven't stumbled across, but how dangerous is the PI career? And it's not real dangerous, James, but there are some things as a private investigator that you need to be aware of and you need to be cautious of. I think the danger level is really going to be defined by what you do and how you react to different situations. I'm not saying it's not dangerous at all, but for instance, if you're doing surveillance and you're confronted by the subject that you are doing surveillance on or by somebody else, how you react to that is really going to define whether that gets escalated or not. For me, if I'm doing surveillance and somebody confronts me, I've always got a pretext story, and I would rather drive off than have a confrontation right there on the street and potentially have problems, especially if it's the subject. If it's the subject of the surveillance, I need to get out and be done anyway, because I shouldn't have contact with them in the first place. My biggest worry has always been more on the process serve side. I've been chased off of more porches. I've had people let their dogs out. I had one situation where a gentleman, it was a difficult serve, and it was a very large property. We knew he was there. I had gone up to the front door. I did what's called service by refusal. And then as I'm walking away, and I was parked about 400 feet away, 400 feet away on the street. I didn't want to park in his driveway. As I'm walking away, he's walking out of the door towards me with his hand on his hip, like he's got a weapon. And he's yelling and screaming at me to leave his property, and things like that. Now, I had another private investigator down on the street that was videotaping and kind of had my six there. But that one was a little scary. But obviously, I don't think the guy actually had a gun. But yeah, I think he was just acting like he had a gun. I've had some other situations where I've kind of been like, oh no, what am I doing here? I've had situations where I've been made on a surveillance and they started following me and things like that. But again, keeping your cool is really important. I suppose when you're doing interviews, if you're going into a questionable neighborhood, that could get a little dangerous too. But usually on those cases, if I'm not comfortable going in by myself, or it's later at night, it's dark, something like that, I'm usually going to have another investigator as a witness and as a backup for me to go along, because there's some power in numbers. If you're knocking on someone's door and you want to do an interview and there's somebody standing behind you, a big bulky guy, a lot of times that's going to deter anything that comes up. So I don't consider it a highly dangerous profession, but there are some things that you definitely need to keep an eye out for, James. I hope that helps. Our next question is from Tufkas01. No formal training. Isn't a career in law enforcement necessary to become a PI? I'm not from the USA, but I heard that you need in most states at least several years of experience as a policeman or a similar experience in law enforcement. Here in Germany, becoming a private investigator isn't even regulated whatsoever. Every person can do it without any license. Thank you so much for that question, Tufkas. And I'm not 100% sure that name is excuse me, but I believe it might be referring to a drink or something like that. But we have a couple of things in common, Tofkus. One, you're from Germany. I'm not from Germany, but I did live in Germany for a few years as an Army brat several decades ago, obviously. But I lived in Hanau, Germany. So thank you so much for listening to me there from Germany and checking out my videos. Also, here in Colorado, due to our governor's infinite wisdom a few years ago, he deregulated the PI business. He decided to eliminate licensing for private investigators here for whatever reason, and that's a discussion for another time. We don't need to go into that right now, but we are no longer regulated under licensing here. Obviously, there's other laws about stalking and about different things like that that do pertain to different things, that we have to abide by, but there's nothing directly for private investigators. But the question saying no formal training isn't law enforcement experience required? The short answer to that is no. for the most part. I think there's one, and I don't even remember what it is, but I think there's one. Maybe it's New Jersey or New York or something like that. But I think there's one state out there that requires law enforcement experience to get your license as a private investigator. Most states that I'm aware of that have licensing do not require law enforcement experience. They do require some level of experience, and that experience may be law enforcement, it may be military, it could be security, it could be process serving, it could be a number of different legal professional areas, or maybe you work as an apprentice investigator under a larger firm or something like that. But the answer is really no, you do not have to have law enforcement experience to be a PI here in the United States, but the licensing is regulated per state. And there are 6 states, Colorado included, that have no licensing, so you don't have to have any experience to be able to be a PI as far as from a legally operating as a professional private investigator. But I would question if you're not licensed somewhere. I'm licensed in other states, in other jurisdictions. I would always question the validity of a private investigator if they don't carry a license. Our next one is from Norman Oman. He says, does it work for numbers overseas? And Norman was watching a video, The Secrets to Obtain Phone Number Information, an OSINT training video that I was making. And Norman, I don't believe any of the databases that I talked about there will work for other countries. I do believe in a lot of countries there are probably some ways to get databases, free databases, excuse me, to get free databases to get phone numbers and stuff, but I don't believe any of the ones that I spoke of. They generally are for the United States here. Most of my videos are going to reference what it is here in the United States. They may have some crossover into other countries, but for your question, Norman, thank you so much for that too. No, I don't believe our database is going to work for those. But sometimes just a simple Google search, so you can go to Google and you can just search for that phone number in quotes, and it's in your normal format of foreign phone numbers. For instance, here in Colorado or here in the United States, generally it's going to be a parentheses, the area code, a parentheses, a space, the first 3 digits, a dash, and the last 4 digits. So if you put all that in quotes, a quote in front and a quote at the end, now you're going to be searching anywhere for that phone number if you're trying to find information for that phone number, that is. But you may be able to find that individual's phone number if you put their name in quotes, quote, Bob Smith, quote, and then quote, parentheses, the area code you think they may live in, another parentheses, and then another quote. Then it's going to look for documents or websites out there that have your person's name and that area code, and then you can start to try to do it that way. But that's another topic for another day, because that goes into some pretty heavy-duty OSINT training there. So our next question from Ireland's Not a Country. Thank you so much for this one. He was watching the video, Don't Be a PI Until You See This. And yes, I still have that same coffee cup until you see this. Don't be a PI, the pros and cons to becoming a private investigator. And he asks, how much do you charge clients? And that's a tough question to answer, because it really all depends. It depends on the type of case. It depends on certain specifics of the case and things like that. And a lot of times when private investigators are talking about the fees, what they're talking about is their hourly fees. And I always caution private investigators to not just look at hourly fees. Don't even quote hourly fees. My clients never see my hourly fee until they see my contract. What I quote them is a retainer. And I calculate a retainer that's going to get the entire job done. If they want 3 days of surveillance, or 1 day of surveillance, or 4 hours of surveillance, or if it's a criminal investigation, I'm going to get an idea of what it's going to take to initiate that, whether it's 20 hours, 50 hours, whatever, depending on the information the client has provided me. And then I'm going to quote them a retainer fee that's going to get all that done. And that's going to be all inclusive for my hours worked and my mileage and my travel time and report time, if there's video editing time in there and stuff like that too. And if you're wondering how to calculate retainers. I do have a video on the channel. You can just go to my channel and you can search for retainer in my videos and you're going to find one. I have multiple videos actually up on the channel about how to calculate them, and I have on my website, on the official PI Guy website, freeprivateinvestigatortraining.com, I have a retainer calculator that I designed in Excel that you can purchase for not very much money. I have less than 20 bucks on there that you can purchase, and it will tell you all about, you know, all the different levels of retainer that you may charge a client. It's focused a lot on surveillance, but you can use it for other ones too. If you're going to do 3 days of surveillance, 10 days of surveillance, 1 day of surveillance, use 2 investigators, 3 investigators, 1 investigator. And I have a video about how to use that, so you might want to check that out as well. But as far as what do I charge my clients, it kind of all depends. And, you know, I charge a different fee for different types of services, and they're calculated in different ways. The best thing for you to do if you're trying to set your fees is really to shop your competitors and see what they are, you know, charging there. But I always suggest to quote to the client, not an hourly fee, but quote that retainer or the cost for a full fee there. Our next question is from Rod Chestnut. Rod asks, isn't the ability to hold and record with the LawMate in the open at an angle that's not normally an iPhone recording angle the very best feature? And what Rod is talking about, excuse me again, I did a video about this covert camera. This is the camera right here. It is an iPhone 6 or 7 case. I have an iPhone 6 plugged into it. It's popped in right here. But the phone is not the determining factor for this. You don't need the phone. I can just turn it on and it's going to start recording. The phone adds a lot of features on it. But the camera is right here. Versus on a phone, the camera is going to be, you know, up here in the corner somewhere on one of the corners. But the camera is actually right here. So what he's saying is, isn't one of the best features the fact that I can be sitting and holding this like this and holding it at a normal angle and acting like I'm texting or looking things up and stuff like that. Obviously, it might be a little bit lower, but it would be like that. And you're absolutely right, Rod. That is a much better feature than doing this. And that is one of the biggest features. There's a lot of features in there. And I actually have a video up on my channel too that goes through all the features and how to use this device and things like that. So, but holding it like that, it keeps you very covert. And, you know, as Rod says, perps might not look at somebody twice if they're just holding their phone flat and they're looking at it in their hand. But if you're recording on a normal phone and you're holding it like this, somebody's going to notice. Or usually you want landscapes, so you're going to be walking around like this and you're going to look kind of funny following somebody with your phone like this, or even if you're following them all the time like this, because you have to keep it pretty straight up and down to get everything. Otherwise, you're just going to get their feet or their head. So thank you very much for that question, Rod. And I'm apologizing for my coughs and stuff, folks. Getting over another cold here, if you can imagine that. And then Ozzy Lambeck asks kind of about the same product. How much do these devices cost? And he's talking about this, and he was watching a recent video that I just released, why the LawMate PV IP7W, which is this one, why it outperforms your cell phone. And I went into some of the details about that. But Ozzy's asking, how much do these devices cost? And they do cost a little bit, no doubt about it. There is definitely some cost and there's some expense, and I'll share with you a little bit here. This is off of my website. I do sell these products. I am a LawMate reseller. Get them drop shipped directly from LawMate right to you if you're looking to purchase one. But let me share a screen here with you from my website. Again, this is off of freeprivateinvestigatortraining.com, and as you can see, there are multiple ones here. This one that I'm talking about is the top middle. It's the LawMate PV IP7W. It's a 1080p covert surveillance camera. It takes the iPhone 6 or the iPhone 7. Again, they're not necessary to have that phone in there, but that does add on to some functionality with it. And they run $305, and that is expensive. I understand it. I get it, folks. They do cost quite a bit of money there. But you have to remember, when you get any piece of equipment, whether it's a covert camera, whether it's a regular camera, whether it's your surveillance vehicle, whatever, a laptop, a computer, that's an investment. That's an investment in your company, and that's going to enhance the work that you do. There's some other ones that you might take a look at there. In the top left is the PV900 EV03. That one, you don't put a phone in it. It has a working screen right on it. You can connect to it with your phone, so you can control it with other devices like that. But it has a screen right on it that you can control everything. It's the newest version out there. And then that bottom left is the PVIP45. That one takes an iPhone 4, 4S, 5, or 5S that you can pop in there. It costs a little less. It's $195. It's a little more affordable. I recommend that a lot of times when you get started. It's only 720p, but it's still excellent video out there. And you can buy a used iPhone on eBay for 30, 40, 50 bucks that you can pop in those things, and then you can run them from that. I also carry that middle bottom one, the PV RC200 HDW, which is the key fob one. It's a covert key fob one. So I carry both those two middle ones there in my arsenal of cameras, because I usually try to keep a key or two, a couple keys on my key fob one as well that I take with me, so it looks a little more realistic, but it looks just like a key fob, and I can walk around with that in my hand, set it on a table, things like that. On the bottom right's another key fob one there, and there's a whole lot. This is just 6 of many, many, many cameras, covert cameras and things like that that I have. So I think I have 9 covert cameras up there, so you want to check it, but I have tons of PI gear on there that you might want to look at. And that top right one is really nice. It is actually a coffee cup lid that you can put on most standard coffee cups. So you can go to your favorite coffee shop on your way out the door to surveillance, and you can get a coffee, and you can put this lid on there, and now you have a camera that you're walking around, and it's staying extremely covert there. So hopefully that answers that question for you, Ozzy. And our next question is from MD Browser. MD asks, can you please make a video about detecting passive RFID? And MD was watching the video, Epic Mobile Surveillance Moments, that I recently had, but this was the question that he had asked there. And I believe he also emailed me, and what he's talking about is the little RFID transmitters, like somebody might stick in to somebody, or something like you might have in a pet or something like that. And I've heard tell with some of those alphabet organizations out there, in certain situations with certain levels of security, people may have these implanted in there. I don't know anything about that. But I do know that if there's something like that in somebody, it's very difficult to find it. I would generally recommend for somebody, if they're looking at something like that and they think they have one on their own body, to talk with their physician first. They're most likely going to be able to, do some x-rays, things like that, to see if you can see it. The problem with trying to locate it with electronics is the human body is full of water. We're just big walking sacks of water. And that makes it difficult for any pieces of equipment like a nonlinear junction detector. We have a very expensive nonlinear junction detector from REI. And what a nonlin does, that's what we call it, a nonlinear junction detector will identify most pieces of electronics, whether they're on, whether they're off, whether they're transmitting, not transmitting, working or not working. Even if they're broken, it's going to do it. But it will not through a human body, because of all of the water that's in the body. Is going to block the ability. Now, there's another thing you have to consider too with a nonlinear junction detector, is it is bursting out a high-powered signal. It's got a high-powered radio frequency signal that it's bursting out, and it's looking for technically it's looking for different frequencies and different resonances that are coming back off of that. I can't go into detail on all of that right now, but because it's sending out this high-powered RF, you do not, whoever want to point that at a person. It's dangerous. You don't want to do it. So we would never use something like that on an individual because there's dangers potentially involved in there. And all of the training that we take, they say never point that. If you're scanning something with it, if you're doing a wall or something and somebody walks by, you need to lower it. You need to make sure you don't point that at anybody. But even using something like an advanced near-field detection receiver may not find anything like that because they're not transmitting all the time. They transmit on occasion. It's similar to like an Apple AirTag or a Tile device or even a GPS tracker. They're not transmitting all the time. Usually they're sending something out once a minute, once every 5 minutes, once every 10 minutes, whatever, because they're going to give you general locations of something, because they would need a whole lot more battery power if they're transmitting all the time. So a regular RF detector, even a near field, an expensive one like the Andre from REI, probably isn't going to find it. So I would recommend that you contact your doctor and you talk with them about your suspicions and try to get an x-ray to see if that's in there. Mike Ritchie is the next question. What use does a phone number and email give you if you're investigating someone? You most likely don't want them to know. If you contact them, then what would you say? If you contact them, won't they be suspicious? I'm not sure what use that information would be. And that's some great questions there. That's good. Thank you so much, BB. I'm glad it's better now. Yeah, I think I actually had two microphones turned on there. Sorry about that. So should I go back to the other questions? Let me know that. If you want me to go back to the first two questions, I can definitely do that. So Mike Ritchie, that's some great questions. What he was referring to was a video that I made about some free databases out there that private investigators can use to get information. And a lot of the information that you'll get from things like that, you might get an address, but you'll also get phone numbers. You'll also get email addresses. And a lot of that information is good if you're trying to verify that you have the right person. So if you can find Bob Smith at this address with this phone number, and then you find Bob Smith used to live at this other address and had this phone number, the same phone number, that will help too. A lot of times getting that information, you just know that it's the right person that you're doing. A lot of cases, I need to have a phone number just to be able to verify that. If I go to one of the paid databases, I may be looking for a very common name like John Smith. I can put in John Smith and an area code, or John Smith and a zip code or something like that to get it narrowed down to the actual individual. Sometimes I might be working for an attorney who is trying to find somebody. Let's say they're a witness and the attorney wants to talk to them. Then I would be providing the attorney that information so they can make contact with them in that situation. I do not just work for Joe Q Public out there and look up this information and give it to them. I would give it to an attorney that I'm working for, but I'm not going to just find somebody's privileged confidential information like phone numbers and emails and addresses and give that to a client out there on that. So hopefully that helps with that. And on occasion, I have in the past, if I'm doing surveillance on somebody and they are not represented, because if they're represented, I can't have any kind of contact with them, and I'm just not 100% sure I have the person, and I think I can do it without making them be suspicious, I might call them with a *67 to identify that it's my person that I'm watching. For instance, I recall one time a very large brownstone apartment complex where I was watching for somebody. I had no vehicle. I had 3 potential addresses in this large complex. He could live in this building, or that building. He'd been moving around to different apartments. I had about a 12, 13-year-old picture of the individual, a vague description of him. I needed to know if it was my guy or not. I saw a guy that fit that description, looked kind of like the person, but I wasn't 100% sure. Walking across the parking lot, I was able to grab my phone, do *67, which will block my phone information, and then his number and call it, and I saw him answer his phone at the same time. So I knew it was him. Now, I've only done that once or twice my entire time, because if they are represented, then you cannot have contact with them in any way, shape, or form. And if you're working for an attorney, you want to be careful of making contact with them as well. So hopefully that explains a little bit about that, Mike. Let's go on to Samuel's question here. Samuel says, I just started being a PI in February. Congrats, Sam. I'm glad you jumped on the bandwagon of private investigations. So far, the biggest issue I've had is mobile surveillance. I've been burned twice because of how I followed, but that's not the main issue. It's the fact that I consistently lose the individual when following because I don't want to get burned. And none of us really ever want to get burned. What is an optimal distance or tactic for following without being seen and without losing sight? Samuel, let me give you a couple of pieces of thought here. When I first got started back many years ago as a private investigator, I got burned a lot. I mean, I got burned all the time, and it was kind of a learning curve for me. I had to learn those same things, how far to stay back, when to take off, and things like that when I was watching somebody. I lost people a lot too. I would say at my pinnacle doing surveillance, and I was working probably 8 days a week. At least that's what it felt like. I was working every single day, sometimes day and night, working multiple different cases out there. So what I would do is I got to where I would be willing to lose the person and save the case for later rather than getting burned. And I would say probably I got burned 3 to 4% of the time. And my company still does a lot of surveillance, but I don't do all the surveillance myself. I contract a lot of that out. I do some of it now, but I contract most of that stuff out. But I didn't get burned as much, but I lost people probably 20 to 30% of the time. And again, when you're doing a lot of surveillance work, a lot of times it's saving that for the next time you're able to work them. The biggest thing with a lot of insurance companies when you're doing that surveillance is getting some level of video. So if you're at the house and you just got video of them walking out the front door, getting in the car and driving off, that's good stuff. That shows that they're active. It shows you have the right subject, the right address, and you're able to conduct surveillance there. So you're probably going to be able to get that work later. If you lose them in the follow, you can always, after you do a little area search for them, after you lose them, go back to the residence and wait for them again and get some more video. I've had a lot of cases where that was the situation just because of following them. You got to make that decision. Do I get burned or not get burned? Insurance companies don't worry as much about you getting burned as you probably worry about it. Or if you're working a family matter, a domestic case, something like that, then you definitely don't want to get burned on something like that. In fact, I don't even take on most domestic surveillance cases anymore unless we can have 2 surveillance investigators out there just to make sure that we can, somewhat guarantee. We can't really guarantee, but we can ensure some integrity to that investigation. But as far as following them, here's some key rules. Obviously, you want to find that sweet spot and distance behind them. What I will often do if I got 2 lanes or 3 lanes and they're in the right-hand lane, I'm going to stay in the middle lane or the left lane. I'm going to stay behind them kind of in their blind spot. Now you have to play this by ear. You want to make sure you're watching ahead. If there's a stoplight coming up, and you've got a big gap, you want to be able to close that gap in case they get through that light. You don't want to get stopped and they've taken off and now you've lost them. Even if they get stopped at the next light, it's very difficult for you to catch them without, racing through traffic. And that's very dangerous doing all of that. So that's one tactic. Sometimes I have to stay right behind them. Here's one of the biggest rules. If you're right behind them, it's not always bad to follow them. Now, if you're following them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, every day, and you're right behind them, they're probably going to take notice of you. But the big thing you do not want to do when you're following a car is this. You do not want to be constantly looking in their side mirror, because when they look in their side mirror and they see you looking in their side mirror, they're going to know you're looking at them, and they're going to wonder, why is this guy watching me all the time? Why is he staring at me? And you may be looking to see, are they getting suspicious? You may be looking to see, if you can get some kind of a tell if they're going to go left or go right or something like that. But you don't want to be doing that. And that's a big thing that a lot of investigators, and I know a lot of veteran investigators that still are constantly looking in the mirror. Here's my biggest solution to that is I just wear sunglasses. Now, you can't wear them at night, obviously, but at night you're not going to be seen looking in their side mirror as much either. But you don't want to always be looking in that mirror. You want to, again, have that distance. You want to be watching ahead. As you get further out, if let's say there's a light that's a mile away, you can spread that distance out a little bit, maybe not a half a block, but 3 or 4 car lengths back. And then as you're approaching a stoplight, you want to start accelerating, not real fast, but you want to start accelerating. So if they get through that light, you can follow them. If they turn right, you of course want to be able to turn right. If I follow them on a turn, I'll usually immediately get over into another lane, if that's possible. If it's a single lane, then that's not always possible. Sometimes I'll back off enough to let another car on a side street come in and get between us. That can get a little iffy, if that other car is going a lot slower or your guy is going a lot faster, you're not going to be able to keep up. But if you're in a multiple lane and they're in the left lane, you can do the exact same thing. You stay back in their blind spot a little bit. But if they're approaching a light, they may get that green arrow and they may take off suddenly and you have to get over. A big thing you have to remember though is watching ahead, so you can, if they do suddenly turn, you can go past, make a U, and come back and make that. If they go to the right, you can take a right into a residential maybe, and then come back around and hopefully catch up to them, but not always. If you do lose them, again, do an area search for 15 or 20 minutes, see if you can find their car somewhere. If you can't, go back to the residence and wait for them. If you wait for them there for about an hour, hour and a half, then it's probably time to contact the client, let them know, or just pull off and save those hours for another day. Again, for me, the best thing is I would rather lose somebody than to get burned, because then I can save it for another day. If it's a domestic situation, it gets a little more dicey there, especially, like if it's a cheating spouse or something. You may have that one opportunity. They're going out tonight. You don't have every other day. A big key to doing surveillance for insurance companies you want to remember is repeat business. When you get that case, if you can get some video of them when they're at their house, get a little bit of video when they're out and things like that, and you don't get burned, that case is probably going to come back to you. I had cases, we've had cases that we have worked 10, 12, 14 times. We might get the case 2 or 3 times a year, just the insurance company checking up to see what activities they're up to and things like that. They're not always thinking there's definitive fraud, but they just want to check things up. And when I was doing a lot of workers' comp surveillance myself, I got to where I'd say 70% or more of my business was what I called repeat business. It was cases that I'd worked prior that I got again. So trying to keep safe with that is a good idea there. Our next question is from Ryan Hayter. Ryan says, John, can you do a video about how to find work as a PI apprentice in my state? I need 4,000 hours, 2,000 hours can't be counted towards your education. And a lot of states with licensing do require some level of experience. In Colorado, we don't have licensing anymore, but when we did have licensing, before our governor decided to get rid of it, when we did have licensing, we had 2 levels of licenses. That was a level 1 license that required no experience, and then a level 2 that required 4,000 hours of experience. And 4,000 hours, just for your reference, equals 40 hours a week full-time for 2 years. So it's quite a bit of experience in there. Some education, some states allow a certain amount of education. It sounds like for you, Ryan, that your state will allow up to 2,000 hours of that be education. So you would have to have an hour of other experience. As far as how do you find the work as a PI apprentice in your state, my biggest piece of advice for you, Ryan, would be get on Google and search for Private Investigator Association in whatever state you are in. Here in Colorado, our state association is the PPIAC, Professional Private Investigators Association of Colorado. I'm a senior member for that. I'm also the president for the PPIAC here in Colorado at the time. And you want to get with them and see when they have meetings and go to those meetings, maybe even join the association and get to networking and seeing who might be able to hire you in whatever capacity. You also want to check your licensing and see what experience counts. what type of a PI experience counts, because in a lot of states, process serving will count for that. So you might get with a process server or get with a PI that's doing a lot of process serving and go out and do a lot of process serves for them. You know, maybe you're going to have to work at a very low rate to get that experience, but you're going to get that. But you're going to really have to get out there and network a lot. I would brush up your resume, make a new resume. I always suggest if you're looking for any kind of work, any kind of a job, you have a resume for each job that you're trying to get. So you make a resume that is geared towards being a professional licensed investigator. And you send that out to every private investigator association, not the associations, but every private investigator firm or PI out there, and just say if there's anything that you need help with. You might consider doing some free work for people, you know, it's going to depend on the type of work or what you can do and can't do, but you might consider doing some of that. Office work may be able to be applied there if you're able to do some searches for them, you know, some skip traces, different things like that. But really the big thing, Ryan, is going to be getting out there and networking with everybody. So let's move on to Oscar LeBron. Oscar asked about the K68. I did a little video on the K68 RF radio frequency detector. He says, is this device great for sweeping a car? And in that video, I don't have the K68 with me right now, but what I did in that video was I had one of these little GPS trackers, a magnetic GPS tracker, and I used it to show what it would do. And I was actually talking about a lot of different devices where you could try to find like GPS trackers and things like that to sweep a car or do other types of bug sweeps. With the K68, it would, when this little boy would chirp, it would give a signal. So we knew that, and I call it chirp or whatever you want to call it, but it would detect there. And the K68 has a magnetic probe you can hook up to it, and when it would get close, I would say within 4 to 6 inches, maybe 3 to 4 inches, then it would detect the magnet that's on the back of this, which was nice too. So you can stick it around and you can see if it lit up and if it told you that there was a magnet on there. And these magnets, they're quite strong. I actually have 2 of them, so you can see they are quite strong magnets on there. So those magnet detectors are really nice. Now, is the K68 great for sweeping a car? No, it's not great. I wouldn't even say it's good. It's okay in some instances, but the most common type of tracker device we're going to find is something similar to this. This is a tile, and you can get those Apple AirTags. You can get ones that are even smaller than this, and they don't have any magnet on them. People will take these and they put a little bit of that double-sided tape on them, and you can stick them anywhere. That magnet detector isn't going to detect it at all. And these have a little chirp to them too, but it's not near as powerful. You have to be a lot closer to it, and it's not for as long. So something like that, and most RF detectors, even professional RF detectors, aren't necessarily going to catch that. So what you're going to find when you're sweeping a car is that a physical inspection with eyes, hands, inspection cameras, looking in every nook and cranny, that is going to be what's going to help you find devices like this or devices like this a whole lot easier than any kind of a device. A lot of people think there's something, even if I take my Andre, my advanced near field detection receiver, and if I use it to sweep a car, then I'm going to be able to find any bug on a car, and you're not. And, you know, we even have a nonlinear junction detector, and you can't use that on a vehicle. A non-lin will identify any electronic item, whether it's on or off, running or not running, transmitting or not transmitting, but there's a lot of limitations with it. And all the metal in a car and all the other electronics in a car would interfere with a non-lin, not to mention the physical size of a non-lin. So really, with a vehicle, the best thing that you can do is eyes and hands and inspection cameras, and you're looking in and under and over and through everything out there. The Deuter, why use that covert camera case? I just use my iPhone 14 Pro that shoots in 4K during covert. And what the Deuter is talking about is this camera right here. This is, and I have it right here, I'll show it to you. This is the Lawmate PV IP7W covert camera, and it is a case for an iPhone 6 or 7. I have an iPhone 6 stuck in it right here. The camera is hidden right here. And the duder is asking me, why do I use this instead of using a regular camera? And he's got a pretty fancy iPhone Pro, and it shoots 4K. And there are downsides to that. We'll cover that here in a second too. But the reason I use this, one of the big reasons, is when it's shooting video, it's shooting 1080p widescreen format all of the time. When I'm using my regular cell phone camera, the tendency is to pull it up like this and then start shooting video. And when you're doing that, you're shooting vertical video. You're not shooting horizontal widescreen video. So you're shooting video like this. And that doesn't look as good. It's harder to edit down, harder to zoom in with your software, things like that. It's also very easy to want to, with your phone, zoom in on it with the video, and then you're now on most phones, after you zoom in just a little bit, you're starting to use digital zoom, and that's very bad for you. You don't want to ever use digital zoom because that's not an actual representation of what you have. It's a digital representation. And for you to get the widescreen view with this, you have to walk around like this all the time, and you might get your finger down there in front of the cameras or something like that. But you're going to look funny walking through the mall like this instead of like this. But if you're like this all the time, you have to have it straight up and down too. Otherwise, you're shooting the lower part of their body or shooting the upper part of the body. With this one, I can just turn it on and it starts recording. And I can just walk around. I can hold it down in my hand, basically, you know, if you think about it, down around my waist. Nobody's really going to think anything of it. I can turn the screen off on the phone, and then it's just a black screen. If the phone's on, it has the iPhone desktop right on there, so it just looks like a normal everyday phone. So that's one of the things. Another one of the advantages to this is it has motion detection. So if I go into a restaurant or if I go to a park or something like that, I can turn on the motion detection. I believe that's this button down here. I can turn on the motion detection, just set it down, and then anytime something walks in front of it, it's going to start recording. I don't use that feature very often. But the biggest reason that I do this, that I use this instead of this, is if the other side questions the technology that I use, they may want to subpoena my phone. And if they subpoena my phone as evidence, now what's on my phone? What's on your phone? My phone, I have my email on there. I have text messages. I have contacts from all my clients, all kinds of stuff like that on my regular phone. I'm going to have to hand that over as a piece of evidence, where if they subpoena this, yeah, I'm out my covert camera for a while. I can replace this. I do have multiple covert cameras too, but then I turn this over, and I'm not turning over any personal data or any client work product or anything like that, like I might be if I turn over this. Another one of the problems with using a phone, if I'm shooting in 4K, that's really, really, really big video. And it's hard to get that video over to your client for them to be able to download it easily because it's such a big file. And it's a bigger file for you to be able to edit. And usually you're going to have to edit it. And when you do edit it down, it's going to be dumbed down to 1080p anyway. So that's why I prefer using this camera here. So we're going to move on here. And we'll go to Big Metal's question here. He says, what camcorder models are you using? And this is in reference to one of my videos about surveillance. And my primary camera that I use is the Panasonic HCV-180. That's my primary camera. All my regular videos, not my live streams, but all my regular videos that I use, that is the camera that I usually use to record that. So if you go back to any of my videos and you look at them, they're being shot with HCV 180. That's my primary camera that I use. I also have a backup camera, my JVC GZ EX210BU. And this camera I love. It's an older camera. It doesn't have the same zoom as the Panasonic camera does, but it has great low light, low lux capability. So I like to have it as my night camera. You want to make sure you have a couple of them there. And again, if you go to my website, freeprivateinvestigatortraining.com, go to the PI gear in the menu up in the top right, and you can see the HCV 180 right there. The JVC camera, I don't believe they make. You might be able to find one used on eBay or something like that. Moving along here, James Page asks, does Colorado have laws in place for this? And he's talking about GPS trackers. It was a video that I was talking about the use of GPS trackers for private investigators. And in Colorado, and now first off, I'm not an attorney, nor do I play one on YouTube or on TV for that matter. But in Colorado, I don't believe there's any laws that speak directly to the use of GPS trackers yet. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't introduce something down the line for it. They have tried, the legislation has tried to get things in the past in regards to the use of GPS trackers. But there are plenty of laws in Colorado and all states that regard stalking and rights to privacy, different things like that. And there have been multiple cases in Colorado where private investigators, along with their clients, have been arrested for using tracking devices to track somebody because they're violating a lot of other laws like people's rights to privacy and stalking. And in most of the cases that I can recall right now, they were arrested for stalking. Now, I think they pled those down to a lower offense like harassment or something like that, but they were arrested for stalking. So I refrain from using it in any way, shape, or form. I won't use a GPS tracker or a Wi-Fi tracker or a Bluetooth tracker or anything like that. As far as your states, you'd have to check the laws. There are some states that actually have laws that say in this instance you can use it, but then there's always the chance that you could get arrested for stalking or harassment. So you want to be very careful if you do use that. Thanks so much for that question, James. Going on, we have JF. JF says, what do you think about the M8000 RF detector? And also, Lay Lamas says, hi, PI Guy, the DEF CON DD1206. What is your take on this detector? And I'll be completely honest with you, the M8000 or the DEF CON DD1206, I don't know anything about either one of them. I have no idea. I know from the standpoint of a professional TSCM sweep, I would want to use the Andre, an advanced near-field detection receiver, plus another $10,000 or $20,000 worth of other equipment to do an actual professional sweep. But from the personal RF detector standpoint, I don't know anything about those. Again, I am a LawMate reseller. If you go to my website, www.freeprivateinvestigatortraining.com, click on the PI gear up in the top right menu, you will be able to find in there the LawMate RD10 and the LawMate RD30 personal RF detectors. These, I can tell you, are pretty good personal detectors. And that's what they are, personal RF detectors. They are not professional bug sweep equipment. Don't buy one of these and go out and try to become a technical surveillance countermeasures expert with one of them. But if you want something that's going to be able to last a long time and be reliable, I would suggest a LawMate over any of those cheap items that you can find on eBay for $40 or $50. Do the LawMate cost a little bit more? Yes, the LawMate products do cost a little bit more, but they're well worth it, in my opinion. Now, TG asks, if we just do sweeps for hidden cameras and tracking devices, is a PI license needed in Illinois? Well, TG, I don't know about Illinois. Now, in Colorado, we no longer have PI licensing, and that's a subject for another another day. I don't want to get into all of that. But when we did have licensing, by the letter of the law, if we were doing technical surveillance countermeasures, TSCM sweeps, we were not required to have a PI license because we're doing an electronic sweep. But the moment that TSCM sweep turns into an investigation, whether you're doing some investigative work before, during, or after, now you're running an investigation and you need that PI license. And if you're calling yourself a private investigator, you probably need a license if you're in a state that has licensing. Now, I'm not that familiar with Illinois licensing for private investigators. I don't know all of their requirements there, so you would have to check with them maybe get a hold of your Illinois State PI Association and see if they have some ideas as to whether you would need that license or not. Tanya T has a quick question here. And BB, I see yours. I'm going to try to get to that here in just a second. Tanya T says, "Hi, John. Where can I go in Massachusetts for PI resources and networking?" Great question, Tanya. Thanks for asking. And thank you so much for investing in your future and looking for those places where you can get some resources and get some networking. I did a little bit of research for you. I would say jump on Google and search for Massachusetts Private Investigators Associations and see what you find. But I did a little bit of research for you, and I'll give you this one. It's a freebie. Go to this website. It's the Licensed Private Detectives Association of Massachusetts. You might check them out. I don't know anything about them. I'm not endorsing them. I'm not associated with them. You might check them out. Most state PI associations have quite a bit of training available to all of their members. And then Cameron Oatman asked, "How is the insurance company sending checks if they don't have his address?" And this is in regards to a workers' comp surveillance case that I did a video about. And basically, we had to go out and we had to hunt down the guy and find an address for the individual. We weren't 100% sure where he lived. They had an address they thought was his, but it turned out to be a relative's. And how's the insurance company sending checks? The bottom line, Cameron, is most of these cases, personal injury, workers' comp, different things like that, they're not sending physical checks anymore. They're usually going to be a direct deposit into a checking account or a direct deposit to a debit card or something like that. So that's kind of why they wouldn't necessarily have that address right there at that time. So let me go online here. BB says, "Hey, PI guy, in regards to process serving work, do you use any particular software and do you advertise that service separately from your PI business?" Great question, BB. I do have a separate business. So I have multiple businesses. I have 6 different businesses. I'll talk about 2 primary ones right now. My investigation business is Evco Investigations. My process serve business is Greeley Process Server LLC. So I definitely have 2 different businesses. I have 2 different websites, evcoinvestigations.com and greeleyprocessserver.com. So I definitely advertise them differently from that perspective there. The software that I use is Serve Manager. It's from a company called Logical, Lawgical, Logical. They have Serve Manager, Serve Now, and PI Now. And Serve Manager is a software I use to manage my process serves. So I put all the information in there and then I can assign it to my process servers. It creates the affidavits for us once we're done. If we're out doing it, I can go out and do a serve. I can pull up my phone and I can just pull it up, Serve Manager right on there. When I do the serve, I put the attempt in. It's going to put the GPS data right in there and everything. And then when I'm done, I can create the affidavit with it. I can communicate with the client. I can send them notes, send them messages, things like that. Absolutely love it. Their other service, Serve Now, is a way to advertise. I am a client of theirs for Serve Now as well, and as for PI Now. With Serve Now for process serve companies, it's really nice because I believe they still do this, but you get your county. So you say, I want this county, and you pay X amount, and I believe that that's usually exclusive for them. They also create websites for private investigators and for process servers. So if you need a good website created, they can help you along those lines as well. And that's probably enough of a free plug for them, but I absolutely love the software. We get tons of serves in. We got 5 or 6 yesterday, and using Serve Manager just saves me so much time because I can copy and paste information right into it or type it up, and it makes making the affidavits so nice. So I hope that helps, BB.